Hello there, Pursuing Freedom friends. Thanks for tuning in. As always, I love having you here. I'm super excited for today's conversation with my friend Catie Lawrence. And the funny thing about Catie and I is that I'm not quite sure how we found each other, but we were just laughing before we started recording about how our souls had a plan probably before they came into this physical being that we were going to meet and connect because we're both from the Philadelphia area originally, and our stories are very similar, while also unique and different. But Catie is just a wealth of knowledge in the world of real estate, investing, and financial freedom. And I'm always drawn to people that have found a way at a young age to retire themselves from the W-2 and use real estate as a path to true financial independence. And she and her husband, Mike, have been there for a few years now. And it's been really fun to watch her journey. So a little background on Catie is that she and her husband founded Happy Homes. They were living and working in the Denver metro area for a long time, and now they're actually making my hometown of Winter Park a full-time residence, which is super exciting. We're going to be actual neighbors living on the same street, which is insane. She is a real estate agent. She's a real estate investor, a marketer, an Airbnb Superhost, a house hacker. She's done fix and flip and all the things financial freedom advocate. She's also an adventurer, a mountain biker, host of a mastermind within her brokerage, and host of the Women's Badass REI Meetup. So with no further ado, I would love for Catie to share her backstory and let you all understand why I was so excited to have her on the show today. So Catie, please go ahead and introduce yourself, share a little bit about your backstory, and let's just dig right in.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Erin. Yeah, it's wild how our paths have crossed. It's serendipitous, really. I think the universe has put us together for the right reasons. Yeah, so I'm Catie Lawrence. My husband and I have our real estate investing company, Happy Homes. Prior to that, though, I was in corporate America for almost 20 years. I really leveraged my W-2 as the years progressed. Investing heavily into all of the tax safe accounts. So the 401s, the Roths, I really leaned into investing prior to real estate. So Mike and I actually got together in high school. We are very familiar with each other. I met him when I was 15. So we moved out to Colorado in 2014, started our business in 2015, and he was the GC of all of our fix and flip properties. So really leveraged his expertise in the field to build wealth through real estate. I am not a very risk person. I'm very risk averse, which you wouldn't think of it from my story, but leveraging that W-2, again, I always thought I would be somebody who was collecting a paycheck. So Mike and I started fixing and flipping. I was on, my 11th boss in 10 years, not really loving my W-2 anymore. So I kind of started formulating an exit strategy, and real estate was really the avenue to do that. In 2021, I got my real estate agent license, really meant for buying and selling our own properties, but that obviously parlays into, clients, friends, family wanting you to help them with their transactions. So that, in a very large nutshell, is a little bit about me and my backstory and how I am here today.
So let me ask you a question. When you talk about being risk averse and you guys went down this path triggered by something, you started doing the fix and flip, and Mike does the construction side of that. So that's awesome. And then you're working your W-2 job. And eventually you took the leap. You quit the W-2 because you had arrived at a juncture where you had enough passive income to live comfortably. How does that come up for you now? Like, how does that play into the now journey? Because I see it a lot where we all have these sort of deep-rooted idiosyncrasies, if you will, right? Fear ultimately
Yeah.
is what it is, being risk averse. Whether you're a high risk or a low risk person, you still have fear. There's no getting around that. But little by little, we start to build confidence, or we take these risks. And on the other side of that risk, it turns out to be the greatest decision ever. And then we face the next risk and we keep going. And but there's still that little like nagging thing within us that is that fear. So how does that play into the current environment you're in, as well as how the market has shifted so dramatically and how that has also affected real estate investors' mindsets? Like, you guys were in the game when things were rocking and rolling, and things have changed a little bit. So how does that come up for you now from a mental, emotional, and also like strategic perspective?
Yeah, yeah. I think mindset is everything. I don't think I realized that years ago when I was just collecting a paycheck, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, I parlayed that W-2 heavily so I could save aggressively. I was a high earner for a long time. But I think understanding, what your end goal is, I love how you talk about that, what like formulating your life around what you want as opposed to your life around work. So because I'm risk averse, knowing that I wasn't happy, I'm also, living by forward motion. I do believe that change comes through movement. So when I started becoming more and more, unsettled at my current gig, I started formulating a plan. Okay, I am not somebody who's just, oh, just quit and everything will work out. Again, very risk averse. So I started saving almost 50% of my take home into all of the investment vehicles, started building up my emergency fund. I mean, this took 2 years. So I'm somebody who, yes, I think you should leverage what you have and take risks. But I think you also need to have a little bit of a runway. I think you need to have a little bit of a plan. And I did that. My girlfriends and I started a financial group several years ago, about 5 years ago. So this knowledge of how compounding interest works, I think that works for a lot of things, not just investing. It works for your mindset. Once you start believing you can do bigger things, you talk about that all the time, Erin. It kind of snowballs. So I think I started planning to exit way before I actually did. And because of the market, how it's changed, I think that mindset of preparing for the worst, hoping for the best. I think that is kind of the mindset I have. A book that talks about this is The Psychology of Money. If anybody is interested, it's an amazing book of just doing what works for you, knowing where your risk aversion lies, as well as your partner, right? Because Mike is somebody who has skill that he's literally like, I could go find a job tomorrow. And I believe I could too, but it's a little different. We're very different in those in that way, like the risk aversion way. So I think I've done a lot of mindset work over the years, just understanding my stories with money, understanding my stories with confidence. You speak about confidence a lot, of just understanding what is working and making sure that you are paying attention to that too. Not just like what isn't working or telling your stories about how something could go wrong, even if it hasn't yet. So I think psychology has a lot to do with it. And mindset has a lot to do with it, and making sure that you have a plan in place. Um, that's how I was able to get comfortable with finally taking the leap, really saving aggressively and kind of having those numbers um, in mind.
I love that book, Psychology of Money, by the way.
Right.
But this is not something we dig into a lot here on the show. In terms of a plan, who mentored you into a plan? What did a plan look like? Or was that just something that you conjured up based on what would feel safe enough for Catie and Mike versus somebody else helping you see beyond your own personal limitations as it relates to your mindset, your belief, etc.?
Yeah, I think it was honestly listening to podcasts about mindset, reading books about financial psychology, just how numbers work, knowing how much we spend in a year. Because I was on the financial independence train, I kind of had those numbers already. How much do we spend in a year? How much do I want to invest in a year? What do we need from a fund perspective? Like, what is needed versus what is nice to have. Ramit Sehi talks a lot about that, living a rich life, spending extravagantly on the things that you love and cutting mercifully on the things that don't matter to you. So I've always had an eye on those kind of things. I mean, some people call me very frugal, but I think having that vision of like that greater vision of financial independence to me means not having to worry about money. And that's a very privileged position to be in. But there was a lot of sacrifice and a lot of savings and a lot of understanding the numbers before I got to that point.
I love that. Spend extravagantly on what matters.
Cut mercifully on the things that don't.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and he talks about his rich life. And that's why I love your podcast because you talk about, stop hustle, hustle, hustle. What do you want your life to look like? Think about abundance. What is working for you? Put systems in place. Um, Understand, those things, and then the universe will provide. And of course, you have to do things in the background. That's also why I love your podcast because you're not just like, well, just sit back and wait for it to happen.
I know, but what I like about your story is that your journey was very intentional and unapologetic. So it sounds like you got clear on what you wanted, and then, you guys identified it, you clarified it, you allowed that to be the compass that would determine certain decisions. And yet, I mean, if anyone follows Catie Lawrence, with a C, by the way, Catie, but follow her on Instagram, because you're going to see not only her and her husband, kicking butt with their properties and the projects they're doing and everything else, but also kicking butt downhill mountain biking and camping and going on road trips and spending their whole summer on the road last year and all this fun stuff. And that's what it's about, is like, can you design a business that fuels the life vision you've always had? And I imagine that when you were plugging away with the W-2 while also chipping away at your big life goal, there was probably some kind of pipe dream there that someday I'm not going to have to ask for vacation days for me to go on the road and run my businesses.
Oh, absolutely. We bought a truck camper and I was still working a W-2 at the time. And the first truck camper trip we took, I was still working. So all of the sites that we pulled into, I had to make sure that they had Wi-Fi, which is still a good way to go, right? I'm still adventuring, but yeah, you are kind of tied to somebody else's schedule. Not to say that you don't have things that you need to accomplish if you're, an entrepreneur working for yourself, but yeah, it was very much a journey.
I love that. So I've heard this story so many times. So real estate investor terms real estate agent because they want to save on commissions. But then the content you've been putting out is so attractive. And it's similar to something I posted this morning where it's like, you go on vacation and your business pops, and why not just do something fun and be surprised that your business will follow that light, essentially the attraction versus the chase. And I feel like that's what's been happening with me as your little, stage 4 clinger online, just following your journey. I'm like, oh my God, it's so fun. I want to know how she's doing that. And so inevitably people are going to want to know the secret. And then all of a sudden you have clients to serve. So now you're selling houses. So how's that transition been for you? And also, I mean, let's talk about how's the transition been for you. And then second part of the question is, I'm really curious to see like how that affects your trajectory of, I'm tethered to a W-2 job, to 2021, I believe, is when you left your W-2. And
Yep.
now it's 2024. You've had like a really fun run the last couple years. You're about to move to the mountains. Your pipe dreams are coming true, which I love. And then all of a sudden you've got clients to serve. And it's like, well, that's exciting and cool. And is it an albatross? Is it exciting? Is there a strategy behind what it looks like to now make that business scalable? Like, I just want to know a little bit more about the transition and how that's
Yeah.
looked for you.
Yeah. So the transition I'll speak to of being an investor and then transitioning to being an agent. So being an investor, you are obviously dealing with contracts and buying properties and selling properties, but you're not really the person handling any of the transactions. So I understood the transaction and almost in a kind of a cavalier way, like, oh yeah, we like buying a house isn't that big of a deal. Well, it's a huge deal. I mean, it's one of the biggest investments you'll ever make. So just that mindset shift of, okay, if I'm going to be helping clients, you have find a home that they want to live in. I have helped investor clients as well, but the first time buyer or even somebody who's selling the home to upgrade because their family's growing, that's a definite transition and a shift. So just learning what they're looking for is very different in a forever home versus an investment home. I mean, I look at homes because one of the strategies we use is renting our own home when we travel. So it's like, oh, my home should always make me money, and that's not really the typical way people look at homes. So there was a little adjustment of making sure that I understood that these people are buying forever homes. So the transition was actually very quick. It was very quick. I got my license, and because I think I was very verbal about real estate and about my business from an investor standpoint, my friends and network just knew that I did that. I go to a lot of meetups from an investment standpoint. So just start talking about, oh, I'm also an agent. So it kind of happened organically. They always say, you're make sure that the sphere of influence, your sphere knows what you're doing. I tell new agents that all the time, or new investors, just make sure that you're talking to your sphere of influence. So that was really helpful. I think just because people knew me as somebody who invested in real estate themselves. So it was very flattering for them to think of me when they thought of purchasing their own real estate. So it was really organic, that transition. And then how it's affecting the trajectory now with us moving up to the mountains, that honestly, I think because I have a pretty good client base and a pretty good sphere down here, we also own, a home in the area that we're not going to be selling. So I think I'll do some back and forth initially, and I think there is still flexibility. That being said, when you are servicing clients, anyone who is a lender, anyone who's an agent knows that when you're servicing clients, that their needs not 100% come first, but you are servicing a client. So you have to make sure that you are available when they are. Because I don't rely solely on the transactional side of things, I think I can pick and choose my clients. I think to a place where I work my referrals, I work with people who know, like, and trust me already before I even start working for them. And that's just how I've done it because I have different arms of income.
Totally. I love also that you talked about the meetups because, a lot of people will listen to a podcast and feel inspired, but not know where to begin. And I was just having a conversation with somebody over the weekend about when you become accustomed to living a life by design and just taking risks and realizing that the worst case scenario is highly unlikely. And usually on the other side of these risks are really cool
Amazing.
opportunities. And the more you spend time with other people that have that mentality, the more normalized it becomes to have a completely unscripted life. And I forget sometimes because I spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs that
Yeah.
don't have a lot of rules, if that makes sense. Like, yes, there are formula. I mean, there are fundamentals and there are systems and there are rules. Don't get me wrong. But when it comes to the possibility of the unknown or the unexpected, we're more curious than a lot of the time than we are scared, but we also have fear. And the antidote to the fear oftentimes is hanging around people that are doing it and representing your future more than the past. And what came up for me over the weekend with this conversation I was having was the realization that that's not how everybody thinks or functions. And so someone's looking at me like I'm a crazy person for all the things, right? Like uprooting and moving to the mountains or going on the road trip or quitting my career to do this other thing or whatever. There's people looking at you like you're a crazy person. But if
Mhm.
you put yourself in the room with people that are doing it and then some, you're now normal and you're on your path. So talk to me about your journey with like the meetups and how you found them because I think it's a
Yep.
strategy to find the meetups.
how I found my mentor at my brokerage, who is big in the investor community. He's written books for Bigger Pockets. He has a podcast. I reached out to him on Bigger Pockets, which is a very large real estate forum. I reached out to him. He could have ignored me. He could have been like, who, like, what? I was very specific about what I was asking him. I gave him a time frame of like, how I would love to get a beer with you. I'm buying. These are the questions that I have for you. It looks like you are doing very similar things to what we're doing. At that point, I was kind of toying, like, should I get my license? He had his license, his real estate license, but he was also an investor. And I reached out and just asked. Again, get specific about what you want to know, ask specific questions. Like I had a few questions to ask. And that's basically how I got involved with him. And same thing with you, Aaron. I listened to a presentation that you gave my brokerage, and I started following you on Instagram. And I reached out, and I think I said, hey, I'm going to be up in Fraser. I know you live in that area in Winter Park. And we ended up meeting. I would recommend people get out there. And if you don't feel comfortable going to a meetup, there's so many forums. There's so many ways that you can reach out to people on social media. My goodness, it's never been easier to reach out to someone. And if they don't respond, don't get discouraged. Reach out to somebody else.
It's funny because your memory of how we became connected is probably accurate, but I feel like when you reached out to me, I, for some reason, thought I was already following you. And I thought what you were doing was so cool that I was like, I need to meet you. And just recently, there was a gal that published a book that I had read. It was so influential for me, and she kept popping up in my feed. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm a fangirl on this woman who is just ahead of me in the game in every way. And I was like, I'm going to message her, and she's going to be a guest on the podcast. Well, she already, the interview has happened. And I felt like such imposter syndrome. So I just want the listeners to know that we all have it. We all have this imposter syndrome of like, well, what if they don't respond? And what if they're too busy? Well, guess what? You can't solve that problem in your head of what if it doesn't work. The question is, what if it does? So just do the reach out, like find the people that remind you of your future and get in the room with them, however you can, whether it's buying a ticket to their event or it's just reaching out and seeing if they can have coffee with you, because most of us will admit we're all winging it.
Yes. And the things that you don't know, again, you'll figure out by doing or by getting somebody who's done it and asking them specific questions.
Yeah. I mean, I just believe that there's nobody that, I always say this, but there's nobody that we admire that's achieved anything that we've desired for our life that doesn't still experience fear and self-doubt and limiting beliefs, because that's part of the human experience. But what I found is I put myself in the room with people where I feel, that imposter syndrome of like, I can't believe they let me in here. And
Yeah.
I just want to learn and be around those people. But it's almost as if through osmosis, but it's really through intentionality of putting yourself in the room that you start to notice your own life expand and relationships show up for you and unexpected opportunities and conversations that trigger the next right step or the next great idea that you have.
Oh, absolutely. And again, just don't be afraid to ask the question, because a lot of people, you'll find people like Aaron who are genuinely super curious, who want to know, but people do like to talk about themselves, I've found. And so if you have questions, ask. Most people are pretty forthright in their experience.
Well, the other reality is that we didn't take the easy route. Entrepreneurship, real estate, sales, real estate investing, whatever it is, it's not like we're taking the conventional route that somebody prescribed to us when we were young.
Yeah.
For most of us, I mean, even those of entrepreneurial parents, like, but for many people, it was go to school, get good grades, go to a good college, get a good job, make good money, invest, and hopefully live until you're old enough to tap into the money you invested. The unconventional path isn't necessarily the easiest path, but it sure is fun. And when you do reach out to others that have been down that path, most of us do want to talk about it, share, and help others avoid the mistakes that we made.
I was doing my W-2 plus on nights, weekends, mornings, lunch breaks. helping Mike demo, load the job with materials, do all the books. I mean, it's a hustle. People now look like and kind of joke like, "Oh, we need to retire like Catie." I'm like, "Well, A, I'm not retired. But B, this is a hustle. Like, what are you willing to put in the work for now so it reaps benefits later?" And to your point, it didn't come with a manual, and everybody does it slightly different. Find the people who are doing it the way you potentially could see yourself doing it and get in the room with them.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I want to honor your time, Katie. So if people want to find you, follow you, get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so you can follow me. I'm very active on Instagram, happy_homes Ltd, or go to happyhomesltd.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Katie, for taking the time to share your story. I love it.
Thank you so much, Erin.
And to all my friends out there, thanks for tuning in. As always, I appreciate you. I would love it if you're enjoying the content that you leave a review wherever you're consuming it. It helps us continue to attract these amazing guests like Katie and help you on your journey to building a life you don't need a vacation from. I love you. I appreciate you. I'll see you next time.